Good evening, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the community, I welcome you all to today's episode of Warriors Journal. And today we are going to speak about UTI management. I, Shalini Singh, a transplant recipient currently on dialysis and also an entrepreneur, am co hosting this event with Sachin. And Sachin, would you please introduce yourself?
Yes, of course. Thanks for that, Shalini. As you all know, I'm Sachin Rao. I've been a dialysis patient for almost 7 years now, and I'm from Mumbai. And I'm an active trader in the share market. And I really am looking forward to this session on UTI because personally, I have gone through a lot in my childhood. And just recently, in fact, in the last couple of years, I had a couple of episodes as well. So, yes, looking forward to this presentation. So,
I'm
over to
sure
you, Doctor.
I'm sure all of us are looking forward for this, and I would like to introduce Dr. Srijit Parmeshwaram, who's with us today to discuss the topic. He is an additional professor and head Department of Nephrology, JUPMA Pondicherry, and his special area of interest includes kidney transplantation, deceased donor organ donation, treatment of ESRD, CKD of undetermined etiology, and preventive nephrology. He has authored several research papers that have been published in prominent Indian and international medical journals. We are honored to have you, sir, with us. Please take over and take us through this journey.
Thank you for the kind introduction, and thanks a lot for inviting me to do this session with you. Happy to connect with people with similar views and see what about contributions and the health knowledge awareness point of view can do. Thank you so much for putting out. So,
Doctor, can you be a little loud? The audio is not really.
okay, I'm sorry. Is it any
Yeah,
better now?
Yes,
yeah,
much better.
much.
But I think I'm moving away from this thing. That's why. So I was thanking you for the inviting me over and uh, giving me an opportunity to contribute to health awareness. Thank you. So I'll directly go to my presentation. Uh,
Yes.
so what I intend to do over next say 20 25 minutes is talk about urinary tract infection and how it impacts people with kidney disease and how it can be dealt with and what we can do about prevention testing. So, first of all, a disclaimer this is purely for information purpose. I request you to consult your doctor when you have specific problems and don't try to diagnose and treat just because I said something in this presentation. All right. What I try to do, what I'll be trying to do over next 10 minutes is briefly. I'm sure all of you having had many problems with your mind, but briefly I'll go over the how to recognize what are the symptoms and how do you identify somebody is having urinary tract infection or not. Even the suspicion is there, how do you confirm that it is urinary infection? Because the similar symptoms, just like a fever can be from anything, the symptoms of UTI can also be from things other than urinary tract infection. So I'll be talking about that part. And what are the sort of people who are at higher? Some people we know are likely to have UTI more often. So what are the risk factors? And what is the some difference is there is important to recognize urinary infection and kidney infection. These are not the same. Briefly about that. And then I'll go on to the problem with making dialysis and maybe again on how to prevent it during urinary tract infection. As you are seeing this, I think this anatomy, I'm sure all of you will be knowing, but I just wanted to emphasize there is a anatomy difference between male and female urinary tract. As you are seeing, the urethra is the tube by which the urine comes out. It is much longer in the male, whereas it is very short in female, and the prostate gland is there, the junction of the bladder and urethra. It has significant impact on urinary infection. So that is the reason I think we should know this. And the other picture is of lung gland. some of the undergone cancer, we know that right lower abdomen is the usual, most common place. It can be on the left side also, but it's placed in the right side usually, and the artery and vein and the connected to the nearby vessels, and urine drains the bladder through the ureter. This again anatomically is different from the normal physiological thing. This again predisposes to uh, infection. And in this picture, you are also seeing something called as this plays through this ureter immediately after surgery to prevent leak anastomosis. So these things are important and has a big impact on urinary infection. So that is the reason I am I like to before we go into the other part of the so the symptoms of urinary tract infection, I'm sure most of you must be familiar. Burning sensation with passing urine, urine may become cloudy. It may have a different smell. Urgency, like you feel like when you feel like you immediately go otherwise it will feel like the you to go to urine. We want to go to washroom very frequently, increase frequency. And when the increased frequency is specifically happening at night, we have to literally get out of bed and go to the washroom, which can not trigger not increased frequency, especially at night. This can also be a kidney disease as well as a urinary infection. You can have something called suprapubic pain in the lower abdomen due to urinary infection. Increased frequency at night or nocturia. Hesitancy is you have difficulty in passing urine. You want to pass urine, but then you need to strain. With difficulty in urine control, as well as fever, rigors, because of urinary infection. So when these symptoms are okay, suggestive of urinary infection, in some cases you may not want to do anything more, and some instances you may actually treat individual symptoms also, but there are some findings which are suggestive of urinary infection on lab investigation. Like for example, we do the leukocytic test, where we find nitrates or leukocyte esterase test. So you have WBCs or nitrates detected in urine leukocytic testing, or the culture grows more than 10 to the power of 5 points. So there is an amount. Just finding some bacterial growth is not enough. The bacterial growth has to be above significant quantity. Okay. A quantity less than that is not considered active. Just growth is not enough. That's an important concept. I think the doctor as well as patient need to. Otherwise, you may get unnecessarily worried with some growth in the culture. Microscopic examination of urine or urine analysis eliminates the bacteria. But this is supposed to be not very specific. So it's not that if we find some WBC, then we definitely have urinary infection. So this has to be interpreted with some caution. In some patients, we may want to routinely do some scans. That that we have some suspicion, some complication, or some predisposing factor producing infection, then we may actually ask for further evaluation, including ultrasound scan or CT scan in patients with UTI. Talking about this, I think we should also understand all those symptoms like burning micturition, hesitancy, increased frequency doesn't necessarily mean that it is only infected. It can be something else also. There are a long list of conditions which can present similar symptoms. You may have this symptom due to something else, like for example, an enlarged prostate gland. It is very common in elderly males. Infection of the prostate. Urinary stones can be similar symptoms. Epididymitis is an infection in the epididymis or near the testis. Some systemic diseases like arthritis, some sort of arthritis, can reduce the as well as conditions like overactive bladder. It may be neurological, it may be from anxious people it may happen. Anxiety. Uh, there may be genital infection, not urinary infection, it may be genital infection, genital infection like candida or diseases. Drugs and treatment, for example, somebody is under radiation treatment for cancer, it can produce inflammation of the bladder. Blood can produce inflammation of the bladder. All these things can produce. So the point is that I want to emphasize, I'm not trying to tell you all this whole, but the message is that having the symptoms of burning, increased frequency, bacteria, hesitancy, doesn't necessarily mean that it is only infection immediately starting the antibiotic. That is the importance of immunizing or consulting a doctor. It's important to make out whether it is actually infection or not. Otherwise, you can will end up taking antibiotics unnecessarily. Then we are aware that there is an antibiotic resistance problem coming up these days, and antibiotics are becoming less and less useful. So we should not be using it unnecessarily. So how do you confirm? This question symptoms may not be, sometimes you may have doubt whether UTI is there or there is something else. Then you have to do the investigation. What is routinely done, I'm sure you must be aware. Dipstick urine analysis is there, where there is stick is dipped in one of the urine, and you read that, and it can tell you if WBCs are there, muscles are there, some enzyme is there. This is where you can make a diagnosis of urinary infection. Urine microscopy may show WBCs and bacteria. Urine culture is more specific, and if you are growing an organism, you not only identify the organism, you also identify whether the bacterial load is significant enough to the symptoms you are having. And it also tells you about which antibody is likely to work for this infection. So you get the sensitivity also. So that helps in deciding treatment. And gram stain is another test which can be done, but it's not very commonly used. We can also help in identifying cultured organism. There are other investigations which we don't do routinely in all cases, but in some cases, especially conjugated UTI, when we suspect that somebody is having repeated UTI, somebody is if UTI comes back, repeated and then comes back. Patient has other features like there are reasons to suspect that there is a predisposing factor which is resulting in UTI or patient has developed some complications from UTI. For these purposes, we do additional investigations like doing ultrasound scan
Uh,
of.
Doctor, our viewers are actually asking us for the audibility. It's not really very audible. Can we adjust something?
Okay. Is it any different now?
Sir, is there any a bit better, sir? Is there any window around you which is open or something?
No. I'm in a perfectly silent room, completely isolated. I don't know where the disturbance is coming from. I am also hearing noises.
Yeah,
Not from here because I'm in a isolated room. There's no noise.
Okay, sir.
maybe because
What you can do is to enhance your audio. Perhaps if you could switch off your video, since you have a limited connectivity. So
Okay.
if we can switch off your
or
video
maybe
and stick
use
to
a
audio
or
only.
maybe if you have an
I switched
headphone
off my
around.
video. Yeah, I switched off my video.
The audio is much better now.
Let's see how the audio is.
How is the audio now?
It's better now. And in case if you have an maybe a headphone around or
No, I don't have an headphone with me right now.
so let's do it that way. So I'd request the viewers to be a little more considerate because doctors' connectivity, the internet connectivity is not the best today.
Okay. But I
Uh,
think now it's much better. We can hear
Yeah,
you.
it's much better. Yes, of course.
okay. Shall I continue?
Yes,
Or
please, doctor, please.
sorry about. I'm really sorry about that part.
That's
The Wi-Fi didn't connect, so.
That's okay. That's okay, doctor. It's audible now.
Yeah, so what I was telling is, we do some investigations to confirm, to rule out any complication from UTI, or when we suspect that there is some problem with the urinary tract, which is predisposing this patient to UTI. We do additional investigations like ultrasound scan of the kidney or the urinary bladder, CT scan, as well as others like post-mortem residual urine. After passing urine, whether there is any urine remaining in the bladder even after passing urine, which can be discussed in detail, as well as when you taking a reflex, you do intravenous urogram and do something called X-rays in urology. So the other point again I wanted to emphasize is that finding few WBCs or pustules in urine doesn't necessarily mean that it's having UTI. Because it depends upon the number, and the number depends upon the technique by which it was done. There are different definitions. So you should find a minimum of say 10 or more WBCs in one hypo or microscopic field. Then only you can say that it is a significant amount of fossils, and then only you consider urinary infection. Less number of WBCs maybe from some other reason. It may be normal also, and non-infectious causes like WBC can be there from condition other than infection. Hormones also can produce pustules in urine. So finding pustules or WBC in urine doesn't necessarily mean that you are having urinary tract infection. Is the audio still bad or how is it?
Sir, it's a bit better than what it was before, but
Okay.
it's a bit better. But we can make out what you're saying.
Manageable.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, it's
manageable.
manageable, definitely.
Okay. Really sorry about that part. So then moving on to the risk factors, like we know that some people are more likely to develop UTI and they have recurrent UTI. So what are the risk factors? One of the most significant risk factor is an obstruction in the urinary tract, either in the ureter or in the bladder or even in the urethra, or it may be due to enlargement of prostate if it is small. So any narrowing of the urinary tract due to any reason is a significant risk factor for urinary infection. There may be structural problems in the urinary tract, which may be congenital or acquired, reflux nephropathy or post-urethral valve. All these people are at high risk of developing urinary infection and repeated infections. Previous having had multiple urinary tract infection in the past is a significant risk factor. Age above 50 years in males due to the prostate and in females due to postmenopausal state. Urinary infections are more common. Any instrumentation of urinary tract, any catheterization or dilatation procedures done to the urethra predispose the patient to infection. Some people have significant association with sexual activity, and that is something which can be managed with treatment, antibiotic treatment. Use of some contraceptive techniques, which spermicides are known to predispose people to infection. Pregnancy is one situation where people are at higher risk of infection, as well as if they develop infection, they are at higher risk of complications. Postmenopausal status, as I told you, is a significant risk factor. And suboptimal voiding habits, like people don't void when this is very common in our country, because washroom facilities are not freely available. Even if it is there, people may be not comfortable using it. So holding urine for too long without passing is recognized as a risk factor for developing urinary infection. So it is important to avoid at frequent intervals. And uncontrolled diabetes. Diabetes per se is debatable. Uncontrolled diabetes, as well as having some complications, that is associated with increased risk of UTI. Sachin, I think if you mute, I think the disturbance is slightly less. Can you keep your, yeah, yeah, thank you. So going on to briefly about the complicated UTI. Before going into the CKD dialysis part, I think it's important to recognize that there is a difference between urinary infection and kidney infection. There are different terms called cystitis. So if the infection is confined to the urinary bladder or the urethra, then it is called lower urinary tract infection, or it's called cystitis urethritis, and kidney is not involved. When the kidney is involved, it is called pyelonephritis or kidney infection, which is more severe. Okay, it is usually the result of ascending infection. Usually the infection most common is cystitis or infection of the bladder. And when the infection ascends to the kidney, it is called pyelonephritis, and it is obviously more severe. You can have impaired kidney function from pyelonephritis. It needs more aggressive treatment, including IV antibiotics, and symptoms are also usually more severe, like high spiking fever, may take longer time for resolution of symptoms, and patient may have increasing serum creatinine as well. So medically, we look at infections in different categories. Most of the urinary infection occurring in women are uncomplicated. So it may be just urinary bladder infection or recurrent infection without any other structural abnormality in the urinary tract are all considered uncomplicated. Even occasional kidney infection in women are not really considered too bad. So that is also considered uncomplicated. And there are complicated urinary tract infections, which I'll be coming to in the next slide, as well as asymptomatic bacteriuria. So asymptomatic bacteriuria is where you find pustules in urine, you culture it, you grow microorganisms, but there is no infection. There are no symptoms. You don't have any ill effects of the urinary infection, but you are able to identify and grow the organism in urine. It is called asymptomatic bacteriuria. Whether that needs treatment or not is not very clear. In some situations, you need to treat them. In some situations, you need not treat or you cannot treat it. Okay. So what is complicated UTI? Complicated UTI is where there is some reason why the person's normal immunological defenses against not developing infection is not there. The defense against natural defenses against infection is compromised, or the patient has a complication from urinary tract infection. So urinary tract infection as such is more common in women. So a male without any other reason, for example, somebody is having stone, somebody is having bladder obstruction, somebody is having prostate, then it's okay. Without any of these reason, if a male has urinary infection, that is considered complicated, and that warrants further investigation to find out why that person developed UTI. That may not be the case when a woman has simple urinary tract infection. Urinary infection in pregnancy is considered complicated because they can develop more severe infection and they usually need treatment through the pregnancy. Infection occurring in the context of poorly controlled diabetes can can be very severe, can produce something called emphysematous pyelonephritis, and can produce kidney failure, can be systemic infection also. So that comes under the complicated UTI. If somebody has obstruction from any rostron, patient has cancer, urethral stricture, and develops infection, it is complicated UTI. Somebody has some neurogenic bladder, some spinal cord injury was there, some neurogenic, the functioning of the bladder is not normal due to neurological diseases. Or there is vesicourinary reflux. There is reflux of urine from, normally the urine doesn't go back from the bladder into the ureters, whereas in some people it reflexes back into the ureter from the bladder, which may be congenital. It can be acquired also. That also results in complications. Somebody may have catheter placed in the urinary tract for various reasons. Any foreign body is a problem, and that comes under the category of complicated UTI. As well as patients with CKD, patient with impaired kidney function, somebody on immunosuppression, patient kidney transplant recipients, hospital-acquired infections, and infections with bacteria which are multi-drug resistant. They are resistant to multiple antibiotics. These are all called complicated UTI and require specific management strategy different from the uncomplicated UTI. So we'll go by one. Urinary tract infection happening in patients with CKD. The risk factors and the clinical manifestations are largely similar. The symptoms are some similar. The risk factors, what we already discussed, are similar in patients with CKD also, but the implications are different. Even if the patient didn't have, patient just had cystitis or lower urinary tract infection, there was no infection of the kidney, still their kidney function can worsen, the creatinine can go up. Usually it returns to the previous level. Suppose the creatinine was 2 and you develop urinary infection and it is treated. Once treated, the creatinine may return back to the previous level, but in some patients it may not happen. So there is risk of, especially if urinary infection happens again and again in patients with kidney disease, there is chance of kidney function worsening. We may find that on culture that the bacteria is sensitive only to drugs which are known to be bad for the kidneys, called nephrotoxic drugs. Then we may, if you have to treat the infection, then you have to use the antibiotic. But if you use that antibiotic, that particular one, it may actually produce damage to the kidney. So that is one dilemma which we are seeing more and more often these days because of antibiotic resistance. Some of the drugs, because to treat urinary infection, the drug has to reach the urine. Okay, so when the kidney function is impaired, the drug may not really reach urine. Okay, so then it becomes less effective. Some of the drugs are not effective. When the kidney function is normal, it can be effective and it can be used, but it cannot be used when the kidney function is low or when the patient is on dialysis. Typical example is nitrofurantoin. Septrin is less effective. And some of the drugs like Septran are associated with more complications like hyperkalemia when you treat somebody with impaired kidney function compared to somebody with normal renal function. So urinary infection in patients with pre-existing CKD is problematic because it can damage the kidney. Treatment is slightly more complicated. You may not be able to use normal drugs which we use. When we use, we may have more side effects as well. So it's important to prevent having recurrent UTI in patients with kidney disease. Urinary tract infection in dialysis is even more complicated because, as you know, a significant proportion of people on dialysis will not have any urine output. Okay, and if you look at the symptoms, how do you make a diagnosis? When do you suspect somebody is having urinary infection? When he has pain while passing urine, increased frequency, when there is patient is not passing urine, even if the bladder is infected, kidney is infected, because urine is not being passed, he may not develop symptoms. So there is a problem with recognizing urinary infection in people who are on dialysis. And the only symptom may be some vague abdominal pain or generalized weakness, some fever. He may not have any urinary symptoms. So because of that reason, making a diagnosis of urinary infection in dialysis patients may be delayed. Okay, that can result in complications. And it's also seen that presence of pus cells in urine or pyuria or WBCs in urine is much more common in patients who are on dialysis, even when they don't have infection. Okay, you may find WBCs or pus cells, but then even 1/3 of people are supposed to be having pyuria and they don't have infection. So there's another factor which we need to understand before starting the patients on antibiotics. But so it's important to do culture in patients who are on dialysis. We should suspect when the fever or other symptoms cannot be explained by infection elsewhere, like respiratory infection or some skin infection. We should suspect urinary infection, and a culture should be ordered. That is what. If we don't do that, we may not be able to make a diagnosis, and treatment may be delayed. The treatment in general, except for dose modification, is required for kidney failure. Otherwise, the treatment and the drug we use are largely similar to people without kidney disease. In kidney transplant recipients, again, I think some of you must have encountered this. Urinary infection is one of the most common complications in patients with kidney transplant recipients. In fact, 25% of kidney transplant recipients are known to develop urinary infection at least one episode in the first year after transplant. It is most common immediately after the transplant operation. There's various reasons: surgical intervention, catheters are placed, patients are hospitalized, they may have pre-existing urinary infection or bladder abnormalities. But the frequency comes down a few months after transplant, but it can happen anytime after transplant also. It never comes back to the normal level because they are immunosuppressed. So even in kidney transplant recipients, there are a few risk factors recognized, like females are more likely, like just in any other UTI. Older people are more likely to develop infection. If the person had recurrent UTI before transplant, after transplant also, this is likely to be there. If the patient had vesicoureteric reflux, VUR, before transplant, then they are more prone to infection even after transplant. Usually, most of the surgical procedures, transplants, surgeons will place a stent to avoid leak. But if you are able to do without placing a stent, which is unusual, the infection rates are less. But you may have some other complications from urine leak. So that is primarily the surgeon who has to decide whether he's comfortable doing it without a stent or not. And keeping the catheter, urinary catheter for long period, usually it is removed within few days. But for some patients, for various reasons, it may be kept longer. In that case, you may have more urinary infection. Transplantation from diseased donor, a cadaveric donor transplant, the more likely to have kidney transplant, you're more likely to have urinary tract infection. People with polycystic kidney disease developing kidney failure and even transplant have higher risk. And if after transplant, suppose there was a delay in the kidney starting to function, called delayed graft function, those people are also at higher risk of urinary tract infection after transplant. So usually there are standard prevention mechanisms, prevention measures put in place, like prophylactic antibiotics is invariably given at the time of transplantation surgery. And after that, these patients are usually put on ceftriaxone prophylaxis for at least 6 months, and in some centers and some patients, we continue it indefinitely also. Some centers also screen without, even if the patient is not having any symptoms, they screen at every regular intervals, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 8 weeks, till 3 months after transplant. But this is not uh, conclusively proven to be useful, so not many centers do it. But that is something which, at least in some selected patients, it may be relevant to do this. The diagnosis, the tests we do are all similar, but we need to understand that the typical symptoms of burning maturation or increased frequency may be absent in kidney transplant recipients. They may have very non-specific symptoms, so it is important to order these investigations with a, even if the symptoms are not very typical, we need to suspect urinary infection and test the patient for urinary infection. And as I mentioned, asymptomatic bacteriuria, where you find bacteria, pus cells, WBCs in urine, and you may actually grow bacteria also, but there is no symptom, there is no rise in creatinine or any other abnormality from the infection, is very common in kidney transplant recipients. Usually, if it is early post-transplant, within 6 months to 1 year, we do treat it, even if there are no symptoms, because it is known to progress to pyelonephritis, infecting the kidney also. But in late transplant, whether there is any benefit or is it okay to observe is not very clear. And most of the people don't really treat aggressively if it happens late, many years after transplant, and patient can be observed for some time. And if any symptoms develop, then patient can be treated. Another thing which is very important to understand in transplant is that patient may have symptoms like burning, maturation, abdominal pain, but that may not be urinary infection. Even acute rejection can result in fever, abdominal pain. When you touch the, over the kidney, the transplanted kidney, it may be painful. So all this can be features of graft rejection. So it's important to differentiate, because the treatment is diametrically opposite. If it is rejection, then you give immunosuppression, you give more steroids, and you don't give antibiotics. Whereas if it is infection, then you need to give antibiotics, and you should not be giving steroids. If you give steroids, the infection will worsen. Okay, so the treatment is diametrically opposite. So it's important to differentiate between the two. And there are a few clues, like for example, if there is rise in creatinine more, it can happen with kidney infection as well, but new onset proteinuria or worsening of hypertension, significant rise in creatinine, all these may point that it may be more likely to be rejection. Or in some patients, we also see that they have infection as well as rejection. So in this situation, most of the nephrologists may actually do a kidney biopsy on these patients, differentiate between urinary infection and rejection. Another very problematic, even not only for the patient, the doctor also is a transplant recipient developing urinary infection again and again, repeated infections, and it is called recurrent UTI when the number of episodes is more than 3 per year or more than 2 in 6 months. These patients usually require much longer. Usually we give around 5 to 7 days of treatment. But if somebody has recurrent UTI, the treatment duration should be much longer, 2 weeks to 3 weeks. And we need to do some investigations to find out whether there is any underlying problem because of which they are developing this recurrent UTI, like ultrasound scan and CT scan and a VU are usually done, and even a cystoscopy may be required in some patients. Consequences for kidney transplant recipients, it can impact the kidney function of the kidney, the transplanted kidney. Even persistent asymptomatic bacteriuria, there are scientific reports saying that they can have, in the long term, kidney function may be affected. Recurrent pyelonephritis is known to impair the kidney function in the long term. Patients may require indefinitely prophylaxis with antibiotics for maybe years together. Some people, it may be so severe that you end up stopping one of the drug, like for example cyclosporin, tacrolimus. Usually it is mycophenolate which is stopped. Some people actually may have to be stopped because of the severe infection happening again and again. And these people who develop infection again and again tend to develop infection with bacteria which are resistant to antibiotics. So finally you will be left with infection which is not amenable to any of the available antibiotics, and they are in real trouble. Okay, these are very difficult situations, and there are very some antibiotics which are specifically used for this purpose. This really needs specific evaluation and specialized care. Otherwise, you can have more problems from multi-drug resistant organisms. So that's about the diagnosis and management, and how do we prevent UTI? We all know that drinking water is a good thing, but kidney patients may not be able to do that because urine output may be less. Some of them may be told to restrict fluid. Otherwise, even if somebody has kidney disease, if urine output is good and there is no edema, restriction of water intake may not be necessary. Okay, such people also can take enough fluid. What basically it helps is to, you pass urine often, so there is no stasis and infection chance is less. So that when it is feasible, that's a good thing to do. Genital areas should be cleaned every day, once in a day. And there are other, we already know about the risk factors, like if there is an obstruction in the urinary tract from stone, prostate. So if somebody is having recurrent UTI, we should look for all these reasons. Reflex is there. If reflex is there, correction of those may be necessary. Prophylaxis with antibiotics may be necessary. Avoiding contraceptives where spermicides are used. Post-menopausal people may require estrogen therapy. Don't postpone passing urine. When you feel like passing urine, if it is possible, then you should pass urine. Don't hold urine for too long, which is bad. And maybe, especially if you have already had urinary infection, you have had multiple infections or some other urinary problem, you should not be doing that. In diabetic people, blood sugar control helps. In pregnancy, we check for bacteriuria in these people and proactively treat it. And in males, if there is no other reason and if they are developing recurrent UTI, circumcision may be useful. Okay, so there are measures which are general for everyone, and there are measures which depends upon the individual's problem, which may have to be done to prevent UTI in future. So that is pretty much I wanted to cover. Like I think I have looked at gone through what are the symptoms and how do we confirm a diagnosis of urinary infection, and all the symptoms may not be always the urinary infection, it may be something else. And what are the risk factors why some people develop UTI more often and severe UTI, complicated UTI, who all are likely to have more severe and more problems from UTI, as well as the transplant and dialysis people, what are the problems they can have from UTI, and few things about prevention. That's all I have from my side. Thank you very much to the foundation, Kidney Veggies Foundation, all of you. I'll be happy to something which I told useful and educative to you. Thank you. I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, Doctor. It was such a knowledgeable session. We could, you almost covered every topic related to this. Yeah, so we'll move on to the question answers now, Sachin.
Yeah, thanks, Shalini, and thank you so much, Doctor, for that wonderful presentation. I mean, just to let you know, what particularly interested me is that bit about dialysis patients who are not producing urine, they can still have a UTI. That was one of my questions because I don't make urine. So I was just wondering whether I would get it or no. And thank you for answering that for me. So we move on to the questions, sir. The first question is actually a part of your presentation. You've covered it in detail. It's how to control UTI. Now you mentioned there are a lot of things that you can do, but what's the number one thing that you would advise to all our viewers, just to avoid repetition? What's the number one advice that you would give to prevent a UTI and control?
Number one thing is if you are having, if there is no restriction fluid intake advice to you. If somebody who's on dialysis and all cannot take fluid, other people like somebody has mild early stage CKD, I think the most important thing is to ensure that you take enough water. That's the most important thing, because that ensures that you pass urine and the bladder is emptied say every few hours. That avoids stasis of the urine, doesn't stay in your bladder for too long. Urine staying in bladder for significant period is a significant risk factor. So that is something I think can be avoided if you take enough fluid. So those people who are not prevented from taking fluid, who are not required to receive fluid, they should ensure that they take enough water. So normal individuals are supposed to take for somebody without kidney disease, the amount of urine expected is minimum 2.5 liters. Okay, if you have to pass 2.5 liters of urine a day, you need to take minimum 3 liters of fluid. It may be including water plus some juice, tea, coffee. There is some water in your rice and other things you take. The side dishes as water. Things, vegetables have water, fruits have water. So everything included should be 3 liters. But this applies do not apply to dialysis people and people who have reduced urine output or edematous people. I'm very don't take it as an advice to blanket for everyone. So that is the most important thing. If there is no restriction on fluid intake, I think is the most important thing to do.
Thank you, doctor. That was a satisfying answer. We have this question next, wherein the patient is asking, is there any permanent solution for preventing this? I know by drinking water and taking antibiotics, we can control. Other than this, anything can be done to restrict UTI infection, which happens frequently.
Yeah, so there is no permanent solution to this, unfortunately. The thing which I think I would like to emphasize is to when somebody has recurrent UTI or complicated UTI, it is extremely important to specifically look for risk factors. Is there any stricture? Is there any prostate enlargement? Is there any functional, like for example, reflex? Somebody it may be related to postmenopausal state. So if we are able to identify the specific predisposing factor, addressing that is the most effective way to prevent it from coming back. But unfortunately, what we find, in some people, however much we investigate, you may not be able to pinpoint this is the reason why this patient is having recurrent UTI. For them, there is no permanent solution. That is where we end up advising the patient to take antibiotic prophylaxis for months together or years together, or keep screening them, treating them. So there is no permanent solution as such, but it is important to look for and identify any risk factor you may be having. If you address that, this problem may be sorted out.
Okay. Right, doctor.
Okay.
So there's no permanent solution, but we always have to be cautious regarding this.
Yep. Thank you so much. And the next question is actually an extension of what you just mentioned, doctor. Um, we've received a question on the live Facebook feed, which says that is PUV or posterior urethral valves related to UTI? And I believe they are, since I think I actually also suffered from PUV in childhood. So I know for a fact that yes, the two are very much related. So if you could please share a little on the two things, doctor.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the most problem usually happens from recurrent infection in patients with posterior valve. This is a problem affecting male children. Okay, this usually manifests in childhood. It can be picked up. You may be lucky because these days scans are very common in antenatal period. So during the screening, sometimes if you are lucky, it may be picked up before delivery itself. In that case, immediately after delivery, this can be corrected. Okay, procedure can be done, so that will prevent obstruction. Otherwise, what usually happens is this is not immediately recognized. The mother thinks the child is fine. They go home. After some time, the child may be crying for no obvious reason, develops fever or starts vomiting, doesn't eat well. Then they bring back the child, and the pediatrician finds that the baby is not growing well, and when they investigate, they find because urinary infection symptoms the baby can't tell, and they may not develop fever. So on testing, they will find that the child has urinary infection, and then on evaluation, the posterior valve is found, which often is delayed by a few months, or rarely we find after years. By the time the damage is done, because the urine has been blocked for a long time, the hydronephrosis develops, the dilatation of the bladder. The child would have had multiple episodes of UTI. There is very bad reflux into both the kidneys. And once that has already happened, the kidney scarring is there. Then even if you correct the posterior urethral valve, which is basically an obstruction at the junction of bladder and the urethra, you remove it, the block is gone, but the damage is there already in the kidney, and it progresses, and the people develop kidney failure. So urinary infection is an integral part of one of the most common and consistent complication of urinary posterior urethral valve, and it is dangerous also.
True, thank you very much. And exactly whatever you said, everything about the reflux, the hydronephrosis, scarring, it's actually happened in my case. Every textbook, word to word. So, and even it's such a difficult thing to detect in children. I mean, mine was detected at the age of 9 months. So I can imagine for 9 months, the entire, I mean, there was a lot of reflux going on, and that caused a lot of scarring in kidneys. It's very important to remove the PUA and in childhood itself, I believe.
Yeah, the key is to recognize it early. Some people, I mean, if it is severe, it can be picked up in the antenatal ultrasound itself. Immediately after birth, if it is picked up, then the kidneys can be saved. Otherwise, it's difficult. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thank you, doctor,
Shalini.
and thank you, Sachin, for your experience, sharing your experience. Doctor, the next question we have is, I lost my kidneys due to UTI reflux, and I am scared that after transplant, would it affect my new kidneys? Yes, this is an important question.
Yeah, so not necessarily. So see, the reflex was happening into your existing kidneys, normal kidneys, like your kidneys, and that got damaged, and you have kidney failure now. Now you are going to do a transplant. That kidney is different. Okay, and that kidney is going to be connected to the bladder. Okay, if the reflex happened due to a bladder problem, which may not be the case in everyone. Somebody has a bladder is not functioning properly, and then the reflex happened. So the same thing can happen in the transplanted kidney also. But the original reflex was not due to a bladder, and bladder is reasonably. It can be made out from something called a urodynamic study. The bladder function is good, even if it is not perfect. If it is good enough, that is what we want. The patient may have to do intermittent catheterization. I don't know whether you have heard of that. Placing catheter, self-catheterization to take out urine multiple times a day. We have transplanted people who have had the posterior urethral valve, who had hydronephrosis, reflux, urethral strictures. We have transplanted them, and after ensuring that the bladder function is reasonable, it may not be perfect, reasonable, and some of them are told to do self-catheterization, and the kidneys have done well. It is not that it is definitely going to happen. What is required is to assess the bladder function properly. There should not be any active infection when transplant is being done. After transplant, close monitoring for infection as well as bladder function has to be done. And reflex, actually, if you see, even somebody who didn't have reflex to start with, most of the transplanted kidneys do reflex. Okay, because the connection we have made, no, human beings have made the connection between ureters and the bladder. Although God has made the normal connection, it cannot be as good. So it leaks. Majority of the people, it does leak. Okay, that doesn't produce any problem for them. Okay, so that is not. So I would think that doesn't mean it is a problem. You get the bladder evaluated properly. If there is no active infection, bladder function is reasonable, it is safe to go and get transplanted.
Bladder evaluation is important
Yeah,
and a
correct.
decision maker. Okay.
Okay, that's
Sachin, over to
interesting.
you.
Thanks a lot, Shalini. That's interesting to know actually one of the aspects of transplant, that the bladder function needs to be evaluated properly. Very interesting to know. Thank you for that, doctor.
Hey,
Okay, now, doctor, there's a, I know we're not discussing specific case studies because as these specific cases obviously need to be taken care of by the respective doctors. But if you could give us an overall opinion on your opinion on this particular case. There's a child who's just 8 years old and she has been frequently bedwetting, and they've taken treatment for anxiety and it seems to have tapered off. But they say 80% relief is there, but still there's still a little bit of issues. And the child is also a little bit short of breath. However, oxygen is showing as 98 to 100% always. Now, the child is otherwise okay, taking part in all activities, studying, playing, etc. Is there any advice you would give to the frequent bedwetting, or is there anything that they can do? The frequent urination at night, especially.
yeah, so that this is an interesting thing. This is not unheard of. That doesn't mean infection. That's again, I want the point I was trying. This symptom, this doesn't look like a urinary infection to me. We need much more. This patient, this child definitely needs evaluation because it's unusual for bedwetting to persist beyond 8 years and all. Occasionally it persists, but then this seems to be because he has already been evaluated by doctors. So there are some conditions where there is no infection, the kidney function as such, the creatinine may be normal, but there is a the amount of water we drink, the thirst is our kidney controls the amount of water goes out of our body, right? If we
Right.
less water, less urine will go, so the kidney will concentrate the urine. Okay, there are conditions where the concentrating function of the kidney is not normal. The clearance of urea, creatinine, everything is normal, but the kidney is unable to concentrate the kidney. For example, you take 3 liters of water in a day, you pass 2.5 liters. But because you were busy, you didn't get access to water, you took only 1 liter. You will not pass 2.5 liters. You will pass only 500 ml or 600 ml or 700 ml. That is because the kidney adjusted based on the availability of water. It reduces the water which goes out. This is for the same amount of urea, creatinine is concentrated in less amount of water and excreted. So this is called concentrating function of the kidney. That can be abnormal in few conditions. It can happen in early chronic kidney disease itself, but in children there are other situations. So this patient, one thing which the child appears slightly breathless. And I don't know. There's no mention of the height, whether there was any growth retardation. So this child definitely needs evaluation. I strongly recommend that the patient should go to a kidney specialist. And specific thing which I would look for is to look for something called renal tubular acidosis, because the patient is breathless and there is nocturia is there, night bedwetting is there, and there are a few other things. There are some genetic conditions which can result in loss of concentrating ability. So the problem here seems to be the problem with concentrating ability. So that needs evaluation. So that cannot be done. It's not possible to advise that, but this child definitely needs evaluation. You should go to a kidney specialist and specifically ask, is it a problem with concentrating problem? We need to know whether the salt intake, whether the baby child is taking a lot of water. If the kidney concentration ability is gone, the child may feel thirsty because urine is, kidney is unable to control the water going out, so they will drink more water. There are other problems which needs to be evaluated. So I don't want to recommend a line of management. I strongly recommend going to a kidney specialist and getting evaluated for things other than urinary infection, which can produce these symptoms.
Right, doctor.
Okay,
Thank you for
thank-
that.
Yeah.
So the next question is also through live session, and this is also a little specific to the patient, but I would still request you to answer this. The question is that though culture doesn't really, there's this patient who is post-transplant and has a routine urine test which reveals high pus cells, and but there is no infection found in the urine culture. So he likes to ask you that the symptoms are of UTI and pus cells are also on the higher side. What is the reason?
Okay, so it can still be UTI by the way, because the normal culture do not pick up all the organs. There are some bacteria which are smart. Okay, they escape the normal culture. It requires specific. The classical example is something called ureaplasma, ureolyticum. There are some organisms, fastidious organisms they are called. So if somebody is having classical symptoms of urinary infection, cells are there, but you are not growing this thing with the usual organisms, then we need to look for these unusual organisms. Actually, they can have other things also, like TB can manifest like this, and other fastidious organisms. So that has to be done. One thing. If that is also not there, then there are other things like prostate infection of the urethra, or there may be some other symptoms like other problem like stricture, urinary stones. There are rare conditions which can, malakoplakia and what it's called. So there are some unusual, which is not often at all, which are very rare, but well described in literature. These symptoms can be due to that. So doing culture and not growing doesn't necessarily mean it is not UTA. So again, this is a issue which requires specialized evaluation, special culture technique. This is not routinely done unless you specifically request. The labs will not do it because it's not required routinely. So you're looking for this unusual organism is one. Organisms is one. And if that is also not there, then look for other things like prosthetic involvement and strictures, calculi, all those things have to be done.
Thank you, doctor.
Thank you, doctor. I think we'll move on to the final set of questions. I think the doctor is short of time, as he said earlier. This question is interesting. I mean, I don't know whether it's true or no. Perhaps the doctor can tell us. He says the question is, are men at a lower risk from developing UTI because of their anatomy, or is it the other way around? And consequently, are there any dietary suggestions to prevent UTI?
Yeah, so men have an advantage definitely because of the anatomy, in the younger ages. Because as I told you in the beginning, I showed you the picture also. The urethra is much longer. Okay, and it opens way away from the our anal canal where you pass motion. Okay, so there is anatomy. There is a long distance. So that is actually medically very important. That is one of the precautions. If you noticed in the slide, precaution when you clean the genital area, women should wipe from front to the back. Otherwise, you may carry bacteria from our anal region into the urinary tract. Okay, so men have definitely have an advantage from. So that's why I'm telling you. I was telling earlier also. If men develop UTI, that needs evaluation because we need to check why this person developed UTI. But that is not the case with women. Women can develop UTI. Okay, it is true. But in men, once they age, once the prostate gland starts enlarging around 50 years or so, that becomes a risk factor for UTI. Okay, so at that point, so beyond 50 years, this advantage goes off when the prostate increases. But even then, they need to be. It's unusual throughout the age. The occurrence of UTI is much less in men compared to women. And if a man develops UTI, that needs to be checked why that person developed UTI. Whereas simple UTI happening in women, especially sexually active women, married women, or sexually active women, then you can actually just manage it without doing any scans, or you can only if it recurs or some complication develops, you need to look because they are prone to develop UTI because of the anatomical disadvantage.
Thank you, doctor. Sachin, would you let me ask another question, or should we just wrap up?
I think we have time for one more. Doctor, do we have time for one more?
Sure, yeah, fine. I'm okay.
Yeah, so this is related to dialysis. The patient asks that I'm on dialysis and get repeated urinary infection. What can be done because the water consumption is already very limited?
Yeah, so that's a difficult question. So again, the question is why. If it is treated, it is not going away. One of the reason is no, if it is happening again and again, he needs evaluation to look whether the infection is remaining in the prostate. Something called prostatitis. The infection may go in the urine or in the bladder, but the infection may stay in the prostate, which may be seeding the urine again and they develop again. And the other thing is the bladder function. Okay, urine volume may be less, but it is still possible that he is not completely emptying his bladder. Normally, a person may pass 400 ml, 500 ml, but he may be passing at a time only say 50 ml, but it's possible that 50 ml remains in the bladder, which didn't come out. Okay, so his bladder function, and I would think his bladder function and the prostatitis can be made only if you will do a per rectal examination with the fingers. That is usually done by urologists. So he needs evaluation for that because this is unusual for dialysis people to have unless there is some other reason. You should not be developing UTI so often. So bladder function has to be evaluated.
So bladder function needs to be taken care of.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, doctor. I think I'll ask the final question and then perhaps the doctor can give us the closing remarks and his pearls of wisdom as to the final advice. This last question is regarding diabetics. Among diabetic patients who are on dialysis, does sepsis start with UTI?
It can. Not only in diabetes, it is more often in diabetes. They may not have any symptoms of urinary infection. It can actually happen in non-diabetic also, even though it is more often in diabetic people. Because in diabetes, as you may be aware, The diabetic affects not only the kidney, it can affect the bladder function also. Something called diabetic cystopathy, because it involves the nerves, peripheral, the lower limb becomes numb, sensation becomes less. So like that, the autonomic nerves can be involved. So the bladder function can be abnormal. It's called cystopathy. It is very often in people with long-standing diabetes. So it is a well-recognized thing. So if you the dictum for doctors is that if a dialysis patient who is not having any urine output and he is having features of sepsis, and you are unable to find it, say a patient is not having diarrhea, it is not in the abdomen, it is not in the lung, it may be pneumonia, it may be in the tummy, but you are unable to locate it, then you should look for, even though there is no feature, then you should look for urinary infection. Okay, so you say a dialysis patient with sepsis, even though there is no symptom related to kidney, we are supposed to check for urinary infection as well, because it doesn't manifest. Unless we look for it, we will not find it. Okay, so that is where this is well known in diabetics. It can happen even in people who are not having diabetes but have renal failure and hardly any urine. It can happen. Yeah, that's true.
Okay, thank you
Thank you,
so much
doctor.
for that. Yeah, thank you so much. So I guess that's a wrap. I think that was a very, very interesting session, Doctor.
Absolutely.
Any final words of advice to our viewers on anything that you'd like to say?
Uh, uh, I think regarding subject, I think I covered most of the thing. My primary thing is, you should be active about yourself, which I think it's important for people to, because I'm in government and we see patients who are not really educated. They don't really they entirely are dependent on us for whatever manifestations. I think it is important for, whereas it becomes problematic when no, it should not be too much also. There has to be a nice balanced understanding and discussion between the patients, because some of you, I'm sure I have seen so many patients who are able to suspect things and bring out things and ask pointed questions, which guides us to make a proper diagnosis and management line. So I think it is very important for you to be proactive in taking care of yourself, be it just kidney disease or dialysis or transplant. Try to read up, or there are a lot of awareness videos, YouTube and all are available. There are websites, professional available. Try to educate yourself a bit about how to take care of yourself. Now what I told is nothing individual. No, these are all already well-known facts. These I'm just conveying. I don't have any specific authority on these things. These are well-known general information. I'm happy that I got an opportunity to highlight it with you. I'm grateful to the foundation for allowing me to do it. And I realize that a good number of you are having kidney patients, and I wish you all well. That you don't have urinary infection or any other problems. And I wish and pray that you get to lead a very productive and happy life despite kidney disease. Thank you.
Thank you, doctor.
Okay, thank you so much for your blessings, Doctor. And as far as our Kidney Warriors family goes, you heard the doctor there. Be proactive as far as your health is concerned. Take control of your health, educate yourself, be informed. And that's the key thing what the Kidney Warriors Foundation stands for. Our message is education as well as awareness. And the golden advice, as you heard from the doctor, do not delay any treatment when it comes to UTI. Do not ignore the symptoms. So thank you very much for joining us today for the episode 16. We'll see you soon in episode 17. Till then, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Bye.
time, doctor.